Welcome to Calm Down with James Eade. I'm James Eade, coming to you from Edge Studio in San Francisco. And San Francisco, like many cities, has taken a big hit since the COVID pandemic, but it's coming back. And if you haven't been here in a while, come on down and visit. But what's Calm Down? Calm Down's a show that we're all kind of uptight these days. Some of us are uptight way too much, way too often. And how do we calm down? We're not really taught how to do this in school. We're kind of not taught how to do this at home. We're taught to do this in certain areas in society, but not all of us have access to these areas. I'm thinking like yoga, something like that, because I make use of yoga now, and I would have laughed at you 10 years ago if you thought I would be using yoga to calm myself down. But it's something I do. Now, I'm doing this mostly to be of service to humanity, but I also have an ulterior motive. I want you to buy this book. This book is called Freedom by James Eade. I'm James Eade. And the book is about my struggles with addiction and my work for recovery from addiction. And one of the things that addicts cannot afford to do is to get upset. For example, right now, Rudy Giuliani just was lost his law license in New York because of misstatements of fact that he told about the 2020 elections. But Donald Trump said the same things, and he's not suffering any consequences from it. And the Supreme Court just passed a motion that says maybe he won't be held accountable. Maybe he's immune. Like, is an official act of the president to lie about the past elections? I don't think so, but maybe they're going to make that case in the court of law. And, I can talk about this, get myself all riled up, but it won't serve me. It won't serve my purpose, which is to stay sober, clean and sober, so that I do not bend my knee to the tyrant of addiction again. Because when I did, I lost my power of choice. I've regained my power of choice. I'm no longer suffering at the whims and the urges and compulsions of something else. And I can calm myself down even when I get agitated, and not a day goes by where I don't get agitated. I get anxious or agitated no matter how much good work I do. And I can calm myself down. What's the thing that I use the most? It's the deep breathing exercises that I were taught. In through the mouth, out through in through the nose, out through the mouth, or any which way that you can make it work for you. But it has to be a deep breath. So it calms me down. The brain can calm the body, and the body can calm the mind. So when we learn these tools and techniques, we have them ready at our disposal. Because when you become agitated, when you become anxious, it's no sense trying to figure something out then, because you're not going to make a good decision. You're not going to come up with the answer. You got to have that answer already predetermined. It's a tool in your toolbox, and you pick it up when you need it. And you use the appropriate tool at the appropriate time for the appropriate problem. And deep breathing is one, but find what works for you. It might not work for you. What works for you might not work for me. What works for me might not work for you, but something will work. Something will help you calm down. Now, one of the segments that we have on the show is we hear from our senior correspondent in Los Angeles, Rick Rosner. And I want to transition to this part of the show, this segment with Rick, because he has a way of getting agitated. And so let's find out what's agitating Rick today.
Welcome to this next segment of Calm Down with James Eade. I'm James Eade, and the next segment involves our senior correspondent from LA, Rick Rosner. Rick is going to come on and tell us what's causing him some anxiety today, or what he's having trouble with being calm about. And so I'm going to bring Rick on now. Here you are, Rick Rosner,
Hey.
senior correspondent from LA. And what's going on today with you,
All
Rick?
right, I'm going to hit a bunch of little topics and then go into the bigger ones.
Okay.
It's always bugged me. I walked out of my big fat Greek wedding when this happened. In a rom-com, when somebody sees the person that they're going to fall in love with and they're so distracted that they fall down. I hate pratfalls in rom-coms. It says to me that that's lazy writing and that you're not going to see anything original in the rest of the frickin' movie. Somebody's looking over it at, ooh, that's a beautiful person, bam, into a wall. That's just, come up with a new thing to do. All right, next thing is, it's happening a lot in LA. I don't know if it's going, I assume it's happening in the rest of the country, when you make a choice in a store, or when getting a sandwich, and the person serving you says perfect. It's not that big a deal. And I should have done that gripe maybe 2 weeks ago. I haven't seen it. Maybe it's already peaked. But there's picking one sandwich out of 8 possible sandwiches, really doesn't merit a perfect. And now for the things that are really getting me worked up. I mean, like the whole debate thing. We're about what, 3-4 days post debate. It's more than worked up. It's like one of those times in your life when you get irrevocable bad news, and you have to reconsider your whole frickin' life. But 2 aspects of it I can single out to get really worked up about. So I looked at all the fact-checking articles, 6 of them, and plus people on TV after the debate. Of course, it was bullshit that there was 0 fact-checking during the debate. But I guess Trump wouldn't have agreed to do it if there had been any fact-checking in the debate. But then maybe Biden's advisors don't let him do a debate like that. In any case, according to most fact-checking counts, Trump told about a lie a minute, 30 plus lies and misrepresentations in 38 minutes of talking. About more than 3 times as many misrepresentations as Biden did. And, all the reporting was immediately after the debate was people freaking out about Biden looking a little loopy, versus Trump. Just the reporting on the lying it came later. But what is a problem, the thing that gets me worked up is, and I've seen journalists say that Brian Seltzer, I don't know, said that the press doesn't cover Trump's lying anymore because it's not news. And, everybody knows he lies with every sentence, and that his base is okay with it. So that's bad that the media aren't covering Trump's lies. It just, I did what? Now I'm sounding a little like Biden. I'm getting super flustered, but you got to keep reporting on Trump's lies. And 40% of people, if that's what you consider his base, are okay with whatever he says. But that leaves 60% of Americans who need to be made aware that the guy just lies all the frickin' time. All right, so that's one half of this thing. One more thing is
I'm going to get you back to yourself.
Okay, the Dunning-Kruger strategy. Dunning-Kruger, as a lot of people who look at Twitter know, is when people are too dumb to know they're dumb. Smart people generally know they're smart. Medium people generally know they're medium. But there gets to be a point as you work your way to dumb land that some dumb people don't realize they're dumb. They think they're smart because they're too dumb to realize they're not. So 50 years ago, Republican think tanks went after these people, or basically they went after dumb people, because they figured out that they're more manipulatable. They're easier to get energized. And we're the modern Republican Party, with a concentrated Yahoo demographic is the result of 50 years of that strategy. The Republicans have painted themselves into a dumb corner. And not just a bunch of dumb people who you could say, you're dumb, look at this. And then you show them, what they're being dumb about. And they're like, oh, okay. No, dumb people who are overconfident in their smartness and can't be told anything, but can be lied to continuously by Trump, like, okay, and just buy it. So, the concentration of dumbness in the Republican Party has me very worked up. It's the devil's demographic.
Okay, Rick. So basically, one of my takeaways was, doesn't the country deserve better than this? Somebody who's obviously was a good man, who may have his best days were yesterdays and not tomorrow's, and a lousy human being who will lie to you and manipulate you, and is 34 counts of felonies against him, and more court cases pending.
Yeah, except a lot of those court cases got scuttled, or at least a lot of the charges potentially got scuttled by the Supreme Court ruling today. And Trump appointed 1/3 of that Supreme Court.
Yeah, Americans are losing confidence in the court as well. The Roe v. Wade decision was just start down a path of decisions that are questionable. But even this decision, which it hits his immunity, it's only in the acts that were official acts. And so, but he is going to say that everything he did is an official act, when obviously that was not the case. Interfering with the peaceful transfer of power is not an official act of the presidency. So, there has to be at some point where we stop being stupid and stop buying into the obvious lies and falsehoods that are being forced upon the American public, left, right, and sideways. It's just a shame, and it does get us worked up. But Rick, do you have a faith? This is what helps me. I have a faith, and it may be unfounded, but I have a faith in the country that yes, there is going to be 1/3, 40% maybe that can be fooled all the time. But I can't believe that all of the people can be fooled all of the time. And they've got to been catching on to this guy. He's a con man. He's a felon. He's got to be held accountable. And don't you think the majority of Americans will see that and not?
Well, yeah, that has been apparent since Trump first announced. He can never win a majority of the American voters, but you don't need to, because the Electoral College. He lost by 2.85 million in 2016, the popular vote, and still won the Electoral College. He lost by 7 million in 2020. He'll probably lose, between, a number that's between 2016's number and 2020's, and depending on where he falls, he can win.
Yeah, because there are swing states, what they call swing states, that have those electoral votes that are going to swing it. And it doesn't need to be a $1 million difference. It just needs to be a few voters difference in those states. And he could possibly swing some of those states over, especially if people don't vote.
Yeah, so here's, where I'm still a little hopeful. There are 18 weeks to go until the election.
Right.
And Biden can show that the debate night was a glitch, that, his people say he had a cold. And,
his voice is
I don't get that like that when I get a cold, but I'm not 81 either. And did they give him cold medication? And though if they had, we maybe would have heard it. But in any case, all this stuff has been bubbling out, but nobody knows what exactly is true, that he's very alert between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. Then he gets, a little bit more discombobulated later in the night.
Gosh, that's true for me today.
Yeah, but that's been reported, but second and third hand. Is that true? And was the way he was during the debate representative of that. And he's got, like I said, 18 weeks to show that that was an outlier, an aberration. And also, I think there needs to be I'm looking forward to a shakeup of his campaign team, because they let him step into, they took a roll of the dice that was really ill-advised. No fact checking. If they knew that that he's less able to express himself at night, they agreed to a 9 p.m. time.
Right.
And some other stuff but like, so, like Obama's campaign team was brilliant. They got him elected twice, a relative unknown. Why aren't people like that on Biden's team? And why isn't the messaging more aggressive? Now, it might be that since we have 18 weeks to go, that they're keeping their powder dry and saving their big spends and their big messages for closer until the election.
It could be.
But I'm hopeful about that.
Right. And, in order for us to calm ourselves when we see something like that, because I was very depressed that night.
Well, I thought I was punching furniture. I was punching. And my wife said, no, you were punching yourself.
Okay. Said, knock on wood.
Yeah, no, it was like bam, 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 bam.
Oh my goodness, it was awful. But the other thing is Obama's first debate was awful too, but he recovered from that. So there may be a second chance. Trump may not allow it because he got what he wanted out of that one.
Right.
But,
if Trump's smart, he won't agree to the second debate because
right.
he couldn't possibly do better. But Trump's not smart, so.
Yeah. It's a Hobson's choice for the American people, but obviously I would go with the decency. And I still think that the country is defined more by decency than it is by the hatred and open disdain for people that are unlike themselves that Trump manifests and encourages in his followers.
But it's not just decency. Biden was first came to the Senate in 1973. He's got 48 years of experience holding national level elected office. He headed the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He's been to Israel 11 times, more than any other president. Now, he's not the absolute smartest president ever. That might have been, Teddy Roosevelt, who wrote 50 books. It might be Jimmy Carter, who was a nuclear engineer. But he's not an idiot, and his 50 years of experience doing this counts for something. So he tried to mention in the debate that in surveys of presidential scholars, there have been 5 of Trump. The highest Trump ever placed was 4th worst president in history. He also placed 3rd worst, 2nd worst, and twice he was ranked absolute worst. Biden came in at 19th best and 14th best. And he's gotten stuff done even in a terrible political environment.
Right. Yes, I couldn't agree more, Rick. So we're going to try to calm ourselves down because we can get worked up talking about this and we don't know what the outcome is. The outcome still could be good for the country.
And like we can get worked up about Project 2025, which is the 900-page platform from the Heritage Foundation that is going to be Trump's blueprint that contains craziness. Like the craziest thing is they want to return sex to its serious procreative purpose. That you shouldn't be under the Heritage Foundation, no sex unless somebody can get pregnant.
Right. It's not for purposes of enjoyment. It could lead to dancing.
But even if it's a disaster and Trump gets the White House and the Republicans get the House and the Senate, they will not get a 60-member majority in the Senate. And that's enough to stop not all of the nonsense, but quite a bit of it.
And so the country will survive is where we're going to leave on.
Yeah, I mean, it leads to it's still on a downward slope, because if Trump gets reelected, then Alito may retire and Clarence Thomas may retire, because they're 73 and 74, letting Trump appoint jurists in their 40s who, given modern medicine, could be on the bench for 50 years.
Yeah, and one of the worst presidents in our history will have appointed 5 Supreme Court members in that case.
That, which is, crazy town.
It really is. But we won't go there. It hasn't happened yet.
That's right.
We're not going to lose any sleep, and we're not going to hit ourselves.
And there's a bunch of really good TV. That's my wife and I watch, 2-3 hours of TV it's the golden age of TV. So even everything else is falling apart, there are some awesome TVs. Unlike our childhoods, when all we had was like the Brady Bunch.
Three channels and rapid ears. But on the other hand, you would know better than I, because didn't you used to write for one of these TV shows?
Yeah, I wrote for Jimmy Kimmel.
You wrote for Jimmy Kimmel. So when you say, it's bad writing when you're doing a pratfall after seeing someone that you think you're in love with, you got some experience talking. You're not just...
Well, the deal is, like, when you work on a show like that, you do multiple passes on the material until you get material that is up to the standards of the show. Judd Apatow, the writer-director, when he does a movie, he calls in all his funny friends from all over Los Angeles. They do a table read. They read through the script, and all his, incredibly talented friends throw out jokes for every moment in the script. And somebody is writing or recording it or writing it down. So you've got, 8, 10, 12 possible jokes for every moment in the script.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to do if you're given, especially now, because everybody has seen everything. Everybody's seen 10,000 hours of TV. So if you throw in a cliche, people are going to...
I've seen that before. Yeah.
Yeah, so you need to take every moment and say, is this the most original it could be?
Rick, what do you think Mel Brooks did? Because there's like 500 jokes a movie, and 250 of them land, but it doesn't matter. You're laughing at something pretty soon.
He went over it. I assume that he sat with each script and he went over it 50 times, looking for more opportunity. Also, he probably had his friends in there.
That's also, what I'm thinking too now.
Also, when they were shooting it, he had funny performers. Gene Wilder's great, Cleavon Little, Richard Pryor, and they would throw out stuff, and he'd go, or let's shoot it. And if it turned out to be,
keeper. Yeah.
Actually, I don't know if Richard Pryor was supposed to be in Blazing Saddles, and then the studio nixed him. He was too dangerous. But Cleavon Little, great too. Harvey Korman, Madeline Kahn.
Yes.
So, but the deal is, try it 6 different ways. Go with the best one. Good for life too. Figure out
who played Igor. Marty
Feldman.
Marty Feldman, a classic actor who was very funny in his own
Igor. I'm Igor.
All right. Sorry. Breaking Steve. All right, Rick. Thanks very much for your senior correspondent report from LA, and we will see you next week.
All right. See you then. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That was our senior correspondent, Rick Rosner, and it's going to be quite the transition from Rick, who's got a very high level of energy, to the yoga teacher, Yudhishthira, who is going to tell us about the yamas and niyamas. And today he's going to pick on one of the yamas in particular and tell us about that one. And it's like, as he told us last week, it's like the 10 Commandments are thou shalt not, and the yamas are like that, thou shalt not lie. And I think it's going to be the topic today. but Yudhisthira is very calm. And you're going to see that in the next segment coming up. Yudhisthira, Niyamas, and Niyamas.
Welcome to the segment of Calm Down. It talks about yamas and niyamas. You know, one of the reasons that we talk about them is that it's a discipline for us to know what to do and what not to do. Most of the time, we can just look inward and know the answers to that. But over the many centuries, the ancient wisdom of the past has come to teach us that there are some things that we can concentrate on doing. And when we're doing these things or not doing these things, we have a sense of calmness within. And so I'm going to bring Yudhisthira on to tell us about the second yama. You remember last week we talked about the yamas and niyamas. The yamas are the things we try not to do. Last week was non-harmfulness, ahimsa. And today it's going to be truthfulness, satya, or non-lying. So here we go. How'd I do? Did I get anything
You did a
wrong?
great job, and you included all the ways that you can express this yama, which is satya is the Sanskrit name, which is Satya.
All right.
And yet that doesn't have a lot of meaning for most people. It hasn't made the way into the common vernacular the way that ahimsa has for a lot of people. But it's often expressed as non-lying, and in a positive way, it's of course becomes truthfulness. So you covered it beautifully, and I just covered it again.
Okay.
So there we go.
So I am going to let you go and take
right,
it away
beautiful.
from here.
Hello, friends. It's an interesting phenomenon that even though I don't see anybody who's watching the show, I don't get any feedback from it, I nonetheless begin to get a sense of being comfortable and having a sense of a relationship with people, whoever it is who's watching this. And as Jim introduced the topic today, it's the second. And when we say second, it means simply that it's usually the second one that's listed in the order of the yamas. They don't actually fall in any particular order. You can start with any one of them, but you have to start somewhere. And so we usually begin with ahimsa, as we did last week, or non-harming. And then here we are talking about truthfulness. And all of these yamas and niyamas, the yamas and niyamas, will have a level of practice to them, which is important to understand because of the fact that they apply at every level. And that is to say that they apply in the actual world. I'll share with you a little bit about my personal journey with non-lying. But it's helpful to understand that non-lying does not apply to simply the words that come out of our mouth, but rather also to the thoughts in our mind and the feelings in our heart. Because the essence of non-lying is not a matter of speaking the factual truth. Sometimes that is indeed, that does line up with what you say, but you might also consider these situations in which to say the factual truth is not beneficial to the person you're speaking to. So one of the fundamental principles of non-lying is that when you are speaking a truth, it will always be beneficial. And that oftentimes requires that you view the higher truth. So if you are seeing someone who's in the hospital, for example, and she might actually look physically ill, that you could honestly and truly say, you look marvelous. You look great. And that will tend to affirm the process of healing. And that's a higher truth than saying you look terrible. What happened? And the principle behind non-lying is that it's a matter of removing those things that are not true to who we are. And when we begin to learn to remove those things that are not true to our nature, we begin to tell the truth. I mentioned that there are these different levels to non-lying, and it sort of culminates, if you go to the final extension of being perfected at this, it means that whatever words or thoughts or feelings you have are so pure of any distortion, any desire for things to be different than they are, that those words, those thoughts, those feelings become manifested as the truth. And so you can, it's sort of like a superpower. And yet, for most of us, we're not going to get to that perfection, but we can begin to clean things up as we go. I've mentioned before, and I'm sure that Jim has mentioned, I mean, he's got this book on recovery, on freedom. And one of the most important things to acknowledge for people who are addicted, and I'll mention that in a little bit more detail in a moment, is that anyone who is addicted to anything is going to lie. And that may sound harsh, but at a very material level, it means that if someone is a drug addict, that person will find a way to justify stealing money out of a parent's purse or wallet, or stealing things from their childhood home in order to continue their delusion about how they want the world to be, which is that they want the world to conform to their addiction. And it may seem like that's an obvious example, but anyone who's addicted to anything ends up lying. It's just a matter of the nature of the lie and the nature of the delusion. When someone is truly focused on the material world, this comes up a lot these days because there's so much turmoil in our world around us, that it's so easy to begin to create an idea in our head that the situation should be different than it is. That if this person gets elected, everything's going to be fine. If this person gets elected, everything's going to fall apart. And, it doesn't matter which end of the spectrum you're on, the delusion remains the same. And so that is an addiction to a material reality, that the idea that if I can just arrange things to be the way I want them to be, if I can just get this person to act the way I think she or he should act, then it's going to end up being just the way I want it to be, and then I'll be happy. So Satya, or non-lying, is really not about that. It's about removing the things that are not true to our nature. And so as we begin to remove those delusions, those addictions, whether it's to a substance or whether it's to the material world, whether it's to social media, or whether it's to alcohol or drugs, remove the delusion, and we begin to immediately become more true to who we are, to our natural selves. And I'll give you a personal example, and it ties into addiction, because for many years in a much earlier phase of my life, I was using drugs and alcohol continuously for many years. And, the number of drugs I was using were predictable. There was things like marijuana or alcohol to sort of calm me down, and there were things like cocaine and methamphetamines to sort of give me energy. And it was always this attempt to sort of make things balance out, and never worked, of course. But I had a period of time in which the week in my life went by, and it took me about a week to realize that I had not used any of those substances. They were around and I had not used them. And it caught me off guard, because I realized that what had changed was the desire to use them. And I have never since touched any of those things in terms of any recreational use. It doesn't bother me to be around alcohol. I don't choose to, usually, if I have a choice. And I certainly don't spend my time around people using drugs. But I had this period of time in which it was almost a sense of divine grace. This is not a show or a conversation about karma and reincarnation. I account what happened for me to be an act of divine grace, and that my particular karma, that the need to play out that role of an addict was done. And when it came time to, at the end of that week, and for a number of weeks after that, I began to self-reflect. I began to look at what I'd been doing. And one of the clearest and first teachings I got, long before I actually was trained in yoga. This was actually, I had none of these tools, but I realized that I had been lying to the people who loved me the most, the people I cared about the most when I got really down to it. And so it was a revelatory experience to be able to understand that I had been lying, and I made a vow at that time that I would no longer lie, in small ways or big ways. Now, there have been times when I've had to understand that to tell something that was not factually true was the higher choice. It was truer in a higher way. I gave an example of that earlier. So that, every statement of truth should be also combined with benefit and kindness to the person you're speaking to. One of the things that is a challenge about practicing non-lying is that it's not just a what comes out of your mouth. It's not just the words. And so there becomes this level of self-awareness around ourselves that we begin to track the thoughts that are going through our head. One of the most important messages around these thoughts in our head is to not identify them as being yours. Yogananda, my guru, said something very simple, a very simple teaching. He said that thoughts are not individually rooted. Thoughts and creativity are universally rooted, and we tune into them. So it's much more along the lines of changing a channel or changing a station that we're going to listen to. And so that's much of the practice right there of changing the input. And so that will change the thoughts that move through your head. That goes way beyond what we're going to talk about for the rest of this time. And we are nearing the end. But I want to at least touch on the fact that these yamas and the niyamas that will come later, these things that we want to do or not do, the weeding of the garden and the planting of the seeds that we want to have grow into the type of plants that will feed us, that will nurture us, or that will offer us beauty. In order to do that, it requires a process. And one of them is that we have to be aware of these thoughts that move through our head. And so it's, if you have ever walked into a room where people have been arguing, you will know that if you open the door, and even if they've stopped talking, you can feel the energy in the room. And it's you know that. So my point is that we need to clear out the thoughts in our mind and the negative feelings in our heart as part of the practice of non-lying. And so there are lots of tools in yoga that will do this. Again, it goes beyond the scope of these little segments that I'm sharing with you. But I did want to bring together these two practices, the non-harming from last week, ahimsa, with this week's teaching on non-lying. And I've already referred to it a little bit, but again, I want to wrap it up and bring it together at that point and say that before something comes out of your mouth, it's a good idea to pause. There's a simple technique, and I might have mentioned this already. I don't know. I may mention it again, but it is that there's a technique to changing your behavior in the world and being able to practice these yamas and niyamas successfully. And it's a 4-part process: stop, breathe, reflect, and choose. To stop means that you literally stop talking. And if you're able to, if you have the control, stop thinking those thoughts. Breathe, and that means literally to stop and begin to breathe and be conscious of your breath. Because what happens when we do that is, and there's neurological changes that take place when we do that as well. But when we begin to calm down, then we can reflect with clarity and choose what we want to say. The challenge for us is that oftentimes we tend to go through that process too quickly. You might have had the experience of sometime having a conflict, not knowing what you should have said, maybe saying the wrong thing. Later on, after hours have passed, or at night when you wake up in the middle of the night, you suddenly know clearly what your response should have been. that's a time to actually choose what you want to say, how you want to reply. So stop, breathe, reflect, and choose before you speak means that when you say something, you will have the option of saying that thing which is true, that thing which is true, and that thing which is also kind or beneficial. And it takes work, but it is work that is worthwhile, and it's worthwhile not only to you, to the one who's practicing, but also to all the people around you as well. So that is the way in which we practice non-lying. We might begin in literal ways, but we then begin to take it into subtler realms, and it works its way from the voice or the words that we speak to the thoughts in our mind, to the feelings in our heart. And the end result is that we feel clear and more in our true nature. So, going back to the very beginning of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, this was Sutra number 3. I mentioned this, I think, in our first class. Then the seer, that's you and me, not the bodies we're in, but who we are, abides in his or her own true nature. That's what the yamas do, and including this yama of satya or non-lying. So I think that'll finish it up for today.
Welcome back to Calm Down with James Eade. And, I wanted to mention again, that I'm in the recovery from addiction. And all of these tools and techniques have been very instrumental in my recovery. It's been able to calm me down when I used to face anxiety and agitation, and I had no way of knowing how to deal with it except by ingesting foreign substances. Well, that stopped working for me. The highs no longer offset the lows. Let's put it that way. But one of the things that I realized was I had what they called contempt prior to investigation. So things like yoga would be suggested to me, and I would say, no, I don't need yoga. Pilates would be good for me too, but I don't do Pilates. Come on. But yoga is so much more than just stretching your body, just helping your flexibility. It's about channeling the energy throughout your body and being able to maintain your breath and be able to move your breath around your body. And I found that the mind can calm the body and the body can calm the mind. And there's so many tools and techniques that I've been exposed to if I was willing to try them. So now I say yes when someone asks me to try something far more often than I ever did before. And this is really one of the important lessons that I want to teach anybody trying to recover. The first is have hope. You can do it. If I could do it, I think anyone can. But that's easy to say. It's hard to do. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's no piece of cake. It's not a walk in the park. Recovery is hard work, but you can do it. You think you can't. One of the things you need around it is a support system. So whether it's a community that you find in a yoga studio, in a temple, in a church, in a mosque, wherever you find it, hang on to it. The community is essential for recovery. And hopefully it's somebody that's been through something like you. Then you have someone to talk to that isn't saying, what's he talking about? They're nodding their heads and understanding. And when you find that, you found help. You found the support that you need. We all need help. And so now I would like to close in our traditional way by going to another yoga teacher, Divya Love Wise, who helped me learn to meditate. And now when we talk, we don't even talk about meditation. So there's many things that I found that she is very wise about, and having us to calm down to close the session, because we may have gotten worked up listening to Rick from senior correspondent from LA can rile you up a little bit. But in any case, we want to end peacefully and calmly. And with that, I'll hand you off to Divya.
Welcome to the final segment of Calm Down. And I want to introduce to you, my loyal listeners and viewers, Divya Love Wise, that wise yogi. And I would like you, at the end of every show, I'm a little bit agitated and worked up and all that kind of stuff. And I was wondering if there's something that you could do to calm me down. could you just say goodbye to us in any way that you see fit?
Sure, I would
Oh.
love to.
I will take off and let you do that. Thanks again.
Okay. Well, bring yourself into a comfortable seated position, feeling your feet on the floor and letting your hands rest in your lap. Palms up or palms down is a great way to start bringing yourself back into center and focus with your own divine energy and letting go of anything that might have wanted to stick to us throughout the day that may be energy we don't want to carry throughout the day. So having this basic position, feeling grounded, even closing your eyes and taking a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. And one of the ways we can bring ourselves back to center is observing with our senses what we can feel, the temperature of the air in the room, observing any sounds that you hear. Noticing any smells in the air. And then bring your awareness to your breath. As though you're watching it from the inside out. Watching the inhale wash into the body. And watching the exhale wash out of the body. Just like the waves of the ocean as they wash onto the shore. And if you find your mind still wandering, you can even place one hand on your lower belly and one hand on your heart so that you can feel with your hands this breath washing in and washing out. And with your mind's eye, visualize this inhalation and exhalation as an internal shower, clearing away your energy so that it's refreshed, it's rejuvenated, and it's restored. Releasing your hands into your lap, just give yourself a few seconds of pause in this return to peace, enjoying it. When you are ready, you can open your eyes wiggling your fingers and your toes, feeling grounded in your body, grounded in the best part of yourself. And you can go out into the world and carry that best part in the forefront of your mind and your heart.